Hello, and welcome back to Muse Reads Tolkien, the Silmarillion. We'll give it a few minutes, see who pops in, and then we'll get started. Hello, Phil. Welcome. Welcome back to the Silmarillion. I'm over here on Twitter because IGN announced they had a really cool big reveal, but their big reveal seems to have been kind of dumb, if it's what they just posted. That's okay. Okay, IGN, I guess. About an hour ago they said, ooh, we've got a big reveal coming, and they hyped it up, and they posted the reveal, and it's a demo trailer for the PlayStation 5, just like what the graphics will kind of look like. We all knew the PlayStation 5 would have good graphics. We were all sitting here thinking you were announcing a game or something. Okay, IGN. Oh, man. I swear, these folks really don't understand what makes people excited about things. Graphics demos do not excite people. That's so dumb. Anyway, today we're going to continue reading the Silmarillion. We were in the Quenta, which is the description of the various gods of the world of Middle-earth, the Valar. We had finished reading about the Valar, and we're headed into reading about other characters. We'll give it a few more minutes. Where did I put? I don't know where I put my lotion. My hands are all dry. Oh, there it is, right behind the water bottle. Okay. How is everybody today? I'm doing pretty good. Got a lot of work done. Woke up at 7:30 because my dog had to go to the bathroom immediately or she was gonna die. Poor thing. Hey, Lobsol, welcome. I really am just still thinking about how they thought a tech demo for graphics is something to hype people up about. Good lord. Hello, handsome Ratch. You are entirely valid. That is a very valid way to eat peanut butter. Hello, E.T. Thank you all for joining me. We'll go ahead and start. I can give a quick summation of what we've read so far. Not too much. A lot of intense language, but not a lot has actually happened. We met God and all his god friends, and they created the universe. Well, they saw the creation of the universe, and so God said, hey, let's do that thing. One of the gods, Melkor, was real jealous. He's our Satan figure. The Valar are the good ones. They descend down into the physical realm to create the world, and we met those people. There's Mon Way. He's the king god, awesome wind god. Aiul, earth god, likes the dwarves. Arome, doesn't matter. Who's the other one? Ulmo, ocean god. Nenya, sadness goddess. All these gods down creating the world while Melkor fucks everything up. So, we are on... Let's see... Alright, we are right here. These are the names of the Valar and the Valier, and here is told in brief their likenesses, such as the Eldar beheld them in Amon. But fair and noble as were the forms in which they were manifest to the children of Aluva Tar, they were but a veil of their beauty and their power. And if little is here said of all that the Eldar once knew, that is as nothing compared with their true being, which goes back into regions and ages far beyond our thought. Among them 9 were of chief power and reverence, but 1 is removed from their number, and 8 remain, the Aratar, the High Ones of Arda, Mon Way and Varda, Ulmo, Yavana, Aul, Mandos, Nenya, and Arome. Though Mon Way is their king and holds their allegiance under Eru, in majesty they are peers, surpassing beyond compare all others, whether of the Valar or the Maiar, and of any order that Aluva Tar has set into Ea. So what he's saying there is, he just named, in our last session, we learned about all the Valar, all the gods, and their husbands and wives and all that. But not all of them are really that powerful or important. The ones that matter are the 8 he just named, minus Melkor made 9, but Melkor is a dick, so we don't count him. Hello, Alexis. Let me move our bookmark. Alright, this is a new section of the Maiar. And so the Maiar are like the archangels, the lesser spirits that are working with the Valar. With the Valar came other spirits, whose being also began before the world, of the same order as the Valar, but of less degree. These are the Maiar, the people of the Valar, their servants and helpers. Their number is not known to the Elves, and few have names in any of the tongues of the children of Aluva Tar. For though it is otherwise in Aman, in Middle-earth the Maiar have seldom appeared in form visible to Elves and men. Chief among the Maiar of Valinor, whose names are remembered in the histories of the elder days, are Ilmare, the handmaid of Varda, and Ionwe, the banner-bearer and herald of Mon Way, whose might in arms is surpassed by none in Arda. But of all the Maiar, Ose and Unen are best known to the children of Aluva Tar. Ose is a vassal of Ulmo, and he is master of the seas that wash the shores of Middle-earth. He does not go in the deeps, but loves the coasts and the isles, and rejoices in the winds of Mon Way. For in storm he delights, and laughs amid the roaring of the waves. His spouse is Unen, the lady of the seas, whose hair lies spread through all waters under sky. All creatures she loves that live in the salt streams, and all weeds that grow there. To her mariners cry, for she can lay calm upon the waves, restraining the wildness of Ose. The Númenóreans lived long in her protection, and held her in reverence equal to the Valar. Hello, Jimmy, Dark Magician. So, what we're describing here are, like I said, basically the angels that serve the gods, and specific angels are loyal to specific gods. Ose works for Ulmo, he's a water angel. Unen is a water angel, his wife, another lady goddess. These are very minor figures who won't show up quite that often. This just kind of his world building. These are people that do exist in the world, even if they don't interact much with the main characters. Melkor hated the sea, for he could not subdue it. It is said that in the making of Arda, he endeavored to draw Ose to his allegiance, promising to him all the realm and power of Ulmo if he would serve him. So it was that long ago there arose great tumults in the sea that wrought ruin to the lands. But Unen, at the prayer of Aul, restrained Ose and brought him before Ulmo, and he was pardoned and returned to his allegiance, to which he has remained faithful, for the most part. For the delight in violence has never wholly departed from him, and at times he will rage in his willfulness without any command from Ulmo his lord. Therefore those who dwell by the sea or go in ships may love him, but they do not trust him. Melian was the name of a Maya who served both Vanna and Este. She dwelt long in Lorien, tending the trees that flower in the gardens of Urmo, ere she came to Middle-earth. Nightingales sang about her wherever she went. Hello, Twin Tails. Melian will actually be a very important figure. She's only briefly mentioned here, but she comes back in stories later when she goes to Middle-earth and does some stuff. Some things happen because of Melian, and she ends up being very important. Wisest of the Maiar was a Loren. He too dwelt in Lorien, but his ways took him often to the house of Nenya, and of her he learned pity and patience. A Loren is the original name of someone you'll know better as Gandalf. Of Melian, much is told in the Quenta Silmarillion, but of a Loren that tale does not speak. For though he loved the elves, he walked among them unseen or in form as one of them, and they did not know whence came the fair visions or the prompting of wisdom that he put into their hearts. In later days he was the friend of all the children of Aluva Tar, and took pity on their sorrows, and those who listened to him awoke from despair, and put away the imaginations of darkness. So that's a foreshadowing of how important Loren will be. Of the enemies. Last of all is set the name of Melkor, he who arises in might, but that name he has forfeited. And the Noldor, who among the elves suffered most from his malice, will not utter it, and they name him Morgoth, the dark enemy of the world. Great might was given to him by Aluva Tar, and he was coeval with Mon Way. In the powers and knowledge of all other Valar he had part, but he turned them to evil purposes, and squandered his strength in violence and tyranny. For he coveted Arda and all that was in it, desiring the kingship of Mon Way and dominion over the realms of his peers. From splendor he fell, through arrogance to contempt for all things save himself, a spirit wasteful and pitiless. Understanding, he turned to subtlety, in perverting to his own will all he would use, until he became a liar without shame. He began with the desire of light, but when he could not possess it for himself alone, he descended through fire and wrath into a great burning, down into darkness. And darkness he used most in his evil works upon Arda, and filled it with fear for all living things. Yet so great was the power of his uprising that in ages forgotten he contended with Mon Way and all the Valar, and through long years in Arda held dominion over most of the lands of the earth. But he was not alone. For of the Maiar many were drawn to his splendor in the days of his greatness, and remained in that allegiance down into darkness. Others he corrupted afterward to his service with lies and treacherous gifts. Dreadful among these spirits were the Valar, the scourges of fire that in Middle-earth were called the Balrogs, demons of terror. So Melkor, the evil god, our Satan figure, from now on he'll be called Morgoth, because he is more goth than you are, and he is now evil. Many of the Maiar, the minor angel figures like Gandalf, were seduced by his power, and so they joined him, and in doing so they were turned into these very dark, twisted creatures called the Balrogs. And if you've seen the Lord of the Rings movies or read the books, the big fiery creature that Gandalf fights in the cave is a Balrog, one of the corrupted Maiar. At that time in history, basically all of the Balrogs had been put to sleep, basically gone underground because the person they were loyal to was gone, and so they were just chilling in the underground. So that's what Gandalf fought. Another of his kind, basically, but turned incredibly powerful and horrible by darkness. Among those of his servants that have names, the greatest was that spirit whom the Eldar called Sauron, or Gothar the Cruel. In his beginning, he was of the Maiar of Aiul, and he remained mighty in the lore of that people. In all deeds of Melkor the Morgoth upon Arda, in his vast works and in his deceits of cunning, Sauron had a part, and was only less evil than his master, and that for long he served another and not himself. But in after years he rose like a shadow of Morgoth and a ghost of his malice, and walked behind him on the same ruinous path down into the void. Here ends the Quenta. So that is the description of all the major godly figures of this world. Morgoth, his servants, all the Balrogs. Yes, when your boss is defeated and you take a long break, you can take your depression nap. That is basically what happens. You've probably all heard of Sauron. He's the one that's the bad guy in the Lord of the Rings. He was actually the understudy. Morgoth was his boss. And obviously, eventually Morgoth is going to lose. The Balrog are going to say, fuck you, Sauron, we're going underground. They don't help him out. Sauron continues to do his own thing and tries to continue where his leader left off, but we will get to that. For now, we're going to start the major story of this novel, the Quenta Silmarillion, otherwise known as The History of the Silmarils. So this is kind of his epic quest story, one of his epic quest stories, one of the earliest ones. And it will deal with very ancient history for the elves and what happened in the very beginning of time. I think it describes how, let's see here. Yes, it describes how the world is first created and what happens when the elves are finally there doing shit. So chapter 1, In the Beginning of Days. Probably take a sip. It is told among the wise that the first war began before Arda was full-shaped, and ere yet there was anything that grew or walked upon earth, and for long Melkor had the upper hand. But in the midst of the war, a spirit of great strength and hardihood came to the aid of the Valar, hearing in the far heaven that there was battle in the little kingdom. And Arda was filled with the sound of his laughter. So came Tolkis the Strong, whose anger passes like a mighty wind, scattering cloud and darkness before it. And Melkor fled from his wrath and his laughter, and forsook Arda, and there was peace for a long age. Tolkis remained and became one of the Valar of the kingdom of Arda, but Melkor brooded in the outer darkness, and his hate was given to Tolkis forever after. In the time the Valar brought order to the seas and lands and mountains, and Yavana planted at last the siege she had long devised. And since when the fires were subdued or buried beneath the primeval hills there was need of light, Eowl at the prayer of Yavana wrought 2 mighty lamps for the lighting of the Middle-earth, which he had built amid the encircling seas. Then Varda filled the lamps, and Mon Way hollowed them, and the Valar set them upon high pillars, more lofty far than any on mountains of the later days. One lamp they raised near to the north of Middle-earth, and it was named Elune, and the other was raised in the south, and it was named Ormal. And the light of the lamps of the Valar flowed out over earth, so that all was lit as if it were in a changeless day. Then the seeds that Yavana had sown began swiftly to sprout and to burgeon, and there arose a multitude of growing things great and small, mosses and grasses and great ferns, and trees whose tops were crowned with cloud, as if they were living mountains, but whose feet were wrapped in a green twilight. Beasts came forth and dwelt in the grassy plains, or in the rivers and lakes, or walked in the shadows of the woods. As yet no flower had bloomed, nor any bird had sung, for these things waited still in the time of in the bosom of Yavana. But wealth was there of her imagining, and nowhere more rich than in the midmost parts of the earth, where the light of both lamps met and blended. And there upon the Isle of Ilmarin in the great lake was the first dwelling of the Valar, where all things were young, and new made green was yet a marvel in the eyes of the Maker, and they were long content. So right now, Middle-earth is a big, great emptiness, beautiful grasslands and trees and forests and some wild animals showing up. There's an island called Ilmarin, kind of in the center, and at the north and south of the world are these 2 great lamps that light up everything. Oh, sorry to hear you don't feel well, Jeff. I hope you feel good soon. Now it came to pass that while the Valar rested from their labors and watched the growth and unfolding of the things they had devised and begun, Mon Way ordained a great feast, and the Valar and all their host came at his bidding. But Eowl and Tolkis were weary, for the craft of Eowl and the strength of Tolkis had been at the service of all without ceasing in the days of labor. And Melkor knew of all that was done, for even then he had secret friends and spies among the Maiar whom he'd converted to his cause. And far off in the darkness he was filled with hatred, being jealous of the work of his peers, whom he desired to make subject to himself. Therefore he gathered to himself spirits out of the halls of Ea that he perverted to his service, and he deemed himself strong. And seeing now his time, he drew near again to Arda and looked down upon it, and the beauty of the earth and its spring filled him the more with hate. Now therefore the Valar were gathered upon Ilmarin, fearing no evil, and because of the light of Elune they did not perceive the shadow in the north that was cast by Melkor, for he was grown dark as the night of the void. And it is sung that in the feast of the spring of Arda, Tolkis, the sister of Arome, and she danced before the Valar upon the green grass of Ilmarin. Then Tolkis slept, being weary and content, and Melkor deemed his hour had come. He passed therefore over the walls of night with his host, and came to Middle-earth far from the north, and the Valar were not aware of him. Now Melkor began the delving and building of a vast fortress deep under earth, beneath dark mountains where the beams of Elune were cold and dim. That stronghold was named Utumno, and though the Valar knew not of it yet, nonetheless the evil of Melkor and the blight of his hatred flowed out thence, and the spring of Arda was marred. Green things fell sick and rotted. The rivers were choked with weeds and slime, and fens were made rank and poisonous, the breeding place of flies. Forests grew dark and perilous, the haunts of fear, and beasts became monsters of horn and ivory, and dyed the earth with blood. Then the Valar knew, indeed, Melkor was at work again, and they sought for his hiding place. But Melkor, trusting in the strength of Utumno and the might of his servants, came forth suddenly to war, and struck the first blow, ere the Valar were prepared. He assailed the lights of Elune and Ormal, and cast down their pillars, and broke their lamps. In the overthrow of the mighty pillars, lands were broken, and seas arose in tumult, and when the lamps were spilled, destroying flame was poured out over the earth. And in the shape of Arda, the symmetry of its waters and its lands were marred in that time, so that the first designs of the Valar were never after restored. Forgot to silence my phone. So what happened there was they created the world, and it was lovely. They loved it. They were like, this is awesome. So they went to a party. And Melkor saw they were partying, and he was real jealous he wasn't invited, and, you know, being a real douchebag, he gathered up his gang, and when they weren't paying attention, he snuck into the north and dug in and built his own fortress, Utumno, which is going to be really important in all the stories. It will come back. He will have that fortress for millennia. And once he had that fortress, you know, his magic was starting to spread out and cause problems, and the gods noticed and were like, hey, that's fucked up. There's this darkness. We should go figure out what he's doing. And while they were looking for him, he struck and he destroyed the lamps that lit up the whole world. And then inevitably the world was destroyed. So basically the first version of the world has been ruined. They're going to have to recreate the world again because of him. In the confusion and the darkness, Melkor escaped, though fear fell upon him. For above the roaring of the seas he heard the voice of Mon Way as a mighty wind, and the earth trembled beneath the feet of Tolkas. But he came to Utumno ere Tolkas could overtake him, and there he lay hid. And the Valar could not at that time overcome him, for the greater part of their strength was needed to restrain the tumults of the earth, and to save from ruin all that could be saved of their labor. And afterwards they feared to rend the earth again, until they knew where the coming of the children of Aluva Tar were dwelling, who were yet to come in a time that was hidden from the Valar. So they're still waiting for the children, which will be the elves and men. Thus ended the spring of Arda. The dwelling of the Valar upon Almarin was destroyed, and they had no abiding place upon the face of earth. Therefore they departed from Middle-earth and went to the land of Aman, the westernmost of all lands upon the borders of the world. Its west shores looked upon the outer sea.
They're gonna be here about 5 minutes.
Do you need me?
Probably. I might need to move the car.
Okay, let me know.
Well, I called them. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry about that. We have some folks coming to deliver a piece of furniture, and she might need me, so I may have to go, but for now we'll keep reading. It is called by the elves Ekaya, encircling the kingdom of Arda. How wide is that sea, none know but the Valar, and beyond it are the walls of night. But the east shores of Aman were the uttermost end of Belagar, the great sea of the west. And since Melkor was returned to Middle-earth, they could not yet overcome him. The Valar fortified their dwelling, and upon the shore of the sea they raised the Pelori, the mountains of Aman, highest upon earth. And above all the mountains of the Pelori was the height upon which summit Mon Way set his throne. Tanquetil they called the Tanquetil, the elves named that holy mountain, and Olose everlasting whiteness, and Alirna crowned with stars, and many names besides. But the Sindar spoke of it in their later tongue as Amon Ulos. From their halls upon Tanaquetil, Mon Way and Varda could look out upon the earth, even into the furthest east. So, what's going on right there? So Melkor, they created the whole world. Middle-earth is the part where the mortals and the children are going to live, and they were chilling in Middle-earth until Melkor caused all those problems. So now they've retreated to the continent to the west, Aman, and decided to make that their stronghold. They're raising these mountains, they're creating all these borders and barriers to Melkor, and that's where they're going to live right now. For probably, I think, for the rest of the story. When wealth is referenced, does that refer to gold and gems or more metaphysics? It depends on the context. Right now, it's probably not golds and gems. Later, it probably will be. Right now, it's probably more of a metaphysical thing. I'm gonna put on my text chime in case she needs me. Alright. Behind the walls of the Pelori, the Valar established their domain in the region which is called Valinor, and there were their houses, their gardens, and their towers. Valinor is the land to the west that all the elves are traveling to in the Lord of the Rings. So at the end of the Lord of the Rings, when they get on that boat and they ride to the west, that's where they're going, Valinor. In that guarded land, the Valar gathered great store of light and all the fairest things that were saved from the ruin, and many others yet fairer they made anew, and Valinor became more beautiful even than Middle-earth in the spring of Arda. And it was blessed, for the deathless dwelt there, and there naught faded nor withered, neither was there any stain upon flower or leaf in that land, nor any corruption or sickness in anything that lived, for the very stones and waters were hallowed. So this is basically heaven on earth. It's, Arthurian legend has a place, an island, that is very much like this. It's very much based on that legend, but I can't remember what the island's called. When Valinor was full wrought, and the mansions of the Valar... Avalon, thank you, that's the one. And the mansions of the Valar were established, in the midst of the plain beyond the mountains they built their city. Valmar of many bells. Before its western gate there was a green mound, Izella Har, that is also named Corollare. Why, Tolkien? Yavana hallowed it, and she sat there long upon the green grass and sang a song of power, in which was set all her thought of things that grow in the earth. But Nenia thought in silence, and watered the mound with tears. In that time the Valar were gathered together to hear the song of Yavana, and they sat silent upon their thrones of council in the Mahanazar, the ring of doom near to the golden gates of Valmar, and Yavana Kementari sang before them, and they watched. As they watched, upon the mound there came forth two slender shoots, and silence was all over the world in that hour, nor was there any other sound save the chanting of Yavana. Under her song the saplings grew and became fair and tall, and came to flower, and thus there awoke in the world the two trees of Valinor. Of all things which Yavana made that they have most renown, and about their fate all the tales of the elder days are woven. So, remember that in the beginning of the world, it was lit by two lamps, which Melkor destroyed, and he destroyed the light of the world. The two trees are going to replace those lamps and become the new source of the most beautiful light in the world. Kind of symbols of everything that the Valar represent and what they want to protect. Beauty and wisdom and life. They are going to be the main focus of basically everything that comes after. The one had leaves of dark green, that beneath were as shining silver, and from each of his countless flowers a dew of silver light was ever falling, and the earth beneath was dappled with the shadows of his fluttering leaves. The other bore leaves of a young green like the new-opened beech. Their edges were of glittering gold. Flowers swung upon her branches in clusters of yellow flame, formed each to a glowing horn that spilled a golden rain upon the ground. And from the blossom of that tree there came forth warmth and a great light. Telperion was the one they called in Valinor, and Silpion and Ninquilate, and many other names. Lorelin was the other, and Malinalda, and Colorin, and many other names in song besides. You don't remember friggin' all those names. It's Telperion and Lorelin. Those are the names. Hello, Akatsuki. In 7 hours, the glory of each tree waxed to full and waned again to naught, and each awoke once more to life an hour before the others ceased to shine. Thus in Valinor, twice every day, there came a gentle hour of softer light where both trees were faint, and their gold and silver beams were mingled. Telperion was the elder of the trees, and came first to full stature and to bloom. And that first hour in which he shone, the white glimmer of a silver dawn, the Valar reckoned not into the tale of hours, but named it the opening hour, and counted from it the ages of their reign in Valinor. Therefore, at the 6th hour of the first day, and of all the joyful days thereafter, until the darkening of Valinor, Telperion ceased his time of flower. And at the 12th hour, Loren her blossoming. And each day of the Valar in Aman contained 12 hours, and ended with the second mingling of the lights, in which Loren was waning, but Telperion was waxing. But the light that was spilled from the trees endured long, ere it was taken up into the airs or sank down into the earth. And the dews of Telperion and the rain that fell from Loren Varda hoarded in great vats like shining lakes, that were to all the land of the Valar as wells of water and of light. Thus began the days of the bliss of Valinor, and thus began also the count of time. Isn't Loren a big forest in Lotar? You're probably thinking of Lothlorien, which I do believe is named for it? Possibly? I'm not entirely sure. But as the ages drew on to the hour appointed by Aluva Tar for the coming of the firstborn, Middle-earth lay in a twilight beneath the stars that Varda had wrought in the ages forgotten of her labors in Ea. And in the darkness Melkor dwelt, and still often walked abroad, in many shapes of power and fear, and he wielded cold and fire from the tops of the mountains to the deep furnaces that are beneath them, and whatsoever was cruel or violent or deadly in those days is laid to his charge. From the beauty and bliss of Valinor, the Valar came seldom over the mountains to Middle-earth, but gave to the land beyond the Pelori their care and their love. And in the midst of the blessed realm were the mansions of Eul, and there he labored long. For in the making of all things in that land he had the chief part, and he wrought there many beautiful and shapely works, both openly and in secret. Of him comes the lore and knowledge of the earth and of all things it contains, whether the lore of those that make not, but seek only for the understanding of what is, or the lore of all craftsmen, the weaver, the shaper of wood, and the worker in metals, and the tiller and husbandman also, though these last and all that deal with things that grow and bear fruit must look also to the spouse of Eul, Yavana Kementari. Eul it is who is named the friend of the Noldor, for of him they learned much in the after days, and they are the most skilled of the elves. And in their own fashion, according to the gifts which Aluva Tar gave to them, they added much to his teaching, delighting in tongues and in scripts, and in the figures of broidery, of drawing and of carving. The Noldor also it was who first achieved the making of gems, and the fairest of all gems were the Silmarils, and they are lost. But Mon Way Sulimo, highest and holiest of the Valar, sat upon the borders of Aman, forsaking not in his thoughts the outer lands. For his throne was set in majesty upon the pinnacle of Tanaquetil, the highest mountain in the world, standing upon the margin of the sea. Spirits in the shape of hawks and eagles flew over to and from his halls, and their eyes could see to the depths of the sea and pierce the hidden caverns beneath the world. Thus they brought word to him of well-nigh all that passed in Arda. Yet some things were hidden even from the eye of Man Way and the servants of Man Way, for where Melkor sat in his dark thought, impenetrable shadows lay. Mon Way has no thought for his own honor, and is not jealous of his power, but rules all to peace. The Vanyar he loved best of all the elves, and of him they received song and poetry. For poetry is the delight of Mon Way, and the song of words is his music. His raiment is blue, and blue is the fire of his eyes, and his scepter is of sapphire, which the Noldor wrought for him. And he was appointed to be the vicegerent of Aluva Tar, king of the world of Valar and elves and men, and the chief defense against the evil of Melkor. With Mon Way dealt Varda the most beautiful, she who in the Sindarin tongue is named Elbereth, queen of the Valar, maker of the stars, and with them a great host of spirits in blessedness. You might notice he is starting to repeat some things. It becomes far more clear here that these are not connected stories, but these are various manuscripts that have been collected together, because he was telling us a story of how the world was created, and then he went on a side trip to tell us about who Mon Way and Yavana and Eul are, when he already told us in the previous chapter who they were. But Ulmo was alone, and he abode not in Valinor, nor ever came thither unless they were need for a great council. He dwelt from the beginning of Arda in the outer ocean, and still he dwells there. Thence he governs the flowing of all waters, and the ebbing, the coursing of all rivers, and the replenishment of springs, the distilling of all dews and rain in every land beneath the sky. In the deep places he gives thought to music great and terrible, and the echo of that music runs through all the veins of the world in sorrow and in joy. For if joy is the fountain that rises in the sun, its springs are in the wells of sorrow unfathomed at the foundations of the earth. The Teleri learned much of Ulmo, and for this reason their music has both sadness and enchantment. Salmar came with him to Arda, he who made the horns of Ulmo, that none may ever forget who once has heard them, and Ose and Unin also, to whom he gave the government of the waves and the movements of the inner seas, and many other spirits besides. And thus it was by the power of Ulmo that even under the darkness of Melkor, life coursed still through many secret lodes, and the earth did not die. And to all who were lost in that darkness or wandered far from the light of the Valar, the ear of Ulmo was ever open, nor has he ever forsaken Middle-earth, and whatsoever may since have befallen of ruin or of change, he has not ceased to take thought for it, and will not until the end of days. And in that time of dark, Yavana also was unwilling utterly to forsake the outer lands, for all things that grow are dear to her, and she mourned for the works she had begun in Middle-earth, but Melkor had marred. Therefore, leaving the house of Eul and the flowering meads of Valinor, she would come at times and heal the hurts of Melkor, and returning, she would ever urge the Valar to that war with his evil dominion that they must surely wage ere the coming of the firstborn. And Arome, tamer of beasts, would ride to at whiles in the darkness of the unlit forests. As a mighty hunter he came with spear and bow, pursuing to the death the monsters and fell creatures of the kingdom of Melkor. And his white horse Nahar shone like a silver in the shadows. Then the sleeping earth trembled at the beat of his golden hooves, and in the twilight of the world Arome would sound the Valaroma, his great horn upon the plains of Arda, whereat the mountains echoed and the shadows of evil fled away, and Melkor himself quailed in autumno, foreboding the wrath to come. But even as Arome passed, the servants of Melkor would gather again, and the lands were filled with shadows and deceit. So what's happening here? We had the creation of the world, everybody was happy, and then Melkor fucked it up. He built his big fortress, Autumno, and he waged war against them, and he struck the first blow. And so the Valar retreated in response because they couldn't find him, they couldn't take him on, and basically gave up Middle-earth to him for now. They surrendered that land to him and went to the Valinor, to the other continent, and created their fortress and built up mountains, and now they have a stronghold. And ever since then, it's kind of been a cold war where nobody's been striking at each other, but they're still enemies, and Middle-earth has only been his. But all the other, the gods and goddesses aren't satisfied with that. They know they have to take Middle-earth back and fix it before the firstborn come, so they're going to have to wage war eventually, and that's what's going to happen soon. Now all is said concerning the manner of the earth and its rulers in the beginning of days, and ere the world became such as the children of Aluva Tar have known it. For elves and men are the children of Aluva Tar, and since they understood not fully that theme by which the children entered into the music, none of the Ainur dared to add anything to their fashion. For which reason the Valar are to these kindreds rather their elders and their chieftains than their masters. And if ever in their dealings with elves and men the Ainur have endeavored to force them where they would not be guided, seldom has this turned to good, howsoever good the intent. The dealings of the Ainur have been mostly with the elves, for the Aluva Tar made them more like in nature to the Ainur, though less in might and stature, whereas to men he gave strange gifts. Explain that paragraph. Basically he's saying the one god, Aluva Tar, Eru, the one, created the elves and men, and the Ainur, the lesser gods that we've been discussing, the Valar, had no hand in their creation. So they are not the gods of the elves and men so much as they are guardians, angels, protectors, to a certain extent. For the most part, they will interact with elves rather than humans, men. Very few men will ever meet them. There's a handful, but not many. And often, there are some problems that happen when the Ainur try to interfere and the things go wrong with the elves. The strange gift is a way that Tolkien discusses the ability to die that men are given. What happens when... So, elves are immortal. They can live forever, but they can be killed. And when they are killed, their spirit goes to the halls of Mandos, where it waits for the world to come to the apocalypse. The apocalypse will happen, the new world will be built, and they will be reborn in the new world. But until then, they have to hang out in the halls of Mandos. Otherwise, if they don't physically die, they can just exist until the apocalypse and come to the new world that way. Men, that doesn't happen. Men die, and nobody knows where their spirit goes. Nobody knows. It doesn't go to Mandos. It doesn't. So it's a mystery where it goes. And that's the gift that is given to them by Aluva Tar. For it is said that after the departure of the Valar, there was silence, and for an age Aluva Tar sat alone in thought. Then he spoke and said, Behold, I love the earth, which shall be a mention for the Quenti and Etani. But the Quendi shall be the fairest of all earthly creatures, and they shall have and shall conceive and bring forth more beauty than all my children. And they shall have the greater bliss in this world, but to the Etani I will give a new gift. Therefore he willed that the hearts of men should seek beyond the world, and should find no rest therein, but they should have a virtue to shape their life, amid the powers and chances of the world, beyond the music of the Ainur, which is as fate to all things else. And of their operation everything should be, in form and deed, completed, and the world fulfilled unto the last and smallest. But Aluva Tar knew men, being set amid the turmoils of the powers of the world, would stray often, and would not use their gifts in harmony. And he said, These two in their time shall find that all that they do rebounds at the end only to the glory of my work. Yet the elves believe the men are often a grief to Mon Way, who knows most the mind of Aluva Tar. For it seems to the elves that men resemble Melkor most of all the Ainur, although he has ever feared and hated them, even those that served him. So, there, another of the gifts that so he calls them the Quendi and Etani. Quendi is elves, Etani is men. The men can defy fate. The elves are sealed to their fate. You know, Aluva Tar has seen the future, he knows what's going to happen. The elves are written into that story. But the men are not written into the story. The men can do, you know, whatever they want to do. To a certain extent, it's understandable. Like, men do a lot of really shitty things in these stories because they have free will. This is kind of what he's saying is their future is not predetermined, they have free will. Elves, to a certain extent, don't because their fate is written. That explains why the elves in Lodor are quite so racist. Well, part of the thing with elves is they are so old that they're gonna hold a grudge against you for something your ancestor did 1,000 years ago, you know? So there's some history that we're gonna deal with that explains a lot of why the elves are the way they are. It is one with this gift of freedom that the children of men dwell only in a short space in the world alive, and are not bound to it, and depart soon whither the elves know not. Whereas the elves remain until the end of days, and their love of the earth and all the world is more single and more poignant therefore, and as the years lengthen, ever more sorrowful. For the elves die not till the world dies, unless they are slain or waste in grief, and to both these seeming deaths they are subject. Neither does age subdue their strength, unless one grow weary of 10,000 centuries, and dying they are gathered to the halls of Mandos and Valinor, whence they may in time return. But the sons of men die indeed and leave the world, wherefore they are called the guests or the strangers. Death is their fate, the gift of Aluva Tar, which as time wears even the powers shall envy. But Melkor has cast his shadow upon it, and confounded it with darkness, and brought forth evil out of good, and fear out of hope. Yet of old the Valar declared to the elves in Valinor that men shall join in the second music of the Ainur, whereas Aluva Tar has not yet revealed what he purposes for the elves after the world's end, and Melkor has not discovered it. So, men have the gift of free will and can defy fate. but in return, they die, and nobody knows where their soul goes. But when the world is reborn in the new version, the second music, it's going to focus on men, whereas the first music was the elves' world. Elves get to live forever, but they really don't get to defy fate or interfere much in the workings of the world. They're kind of just the surveyors. They are the witnesses rather than active participants. Obviously, elves do things to interfere with the world, but it's kind of already been pre-written. God knows it's going to happen, whereas men can do whatever the fuck they want. So that was the Quenta Silmarillion, which, well, that's chapter 1 of it. Chapter 2 is going to deal with a side thing, and not so much with the actual Silmarils. We really haven't gotten to the Silmarils yet. We have some time. We'll read chapter 2, and then we'll call it there. Chapter 2 is fun. Chapter 2 of Aiul and Yavana. It is told that in their beginning, the dwarves were made by Aiul in the darkness of Middle-earth. For so greatly did Aiul desire the coming of the children, to have learners to whom he could teach his lore and his crafts, that he was unwilling to await the fulfillment of the designs of Aluva Tar. And Aiul made the dwarves even as they still are, because the forms of the children who were to come were unclear to his mind, and because the power of Melkor was yet over the earth, and he wished therefore that they should be strong and unyielding. But fearing that the other Valar might blame his work, he wrought in secret, and he made first the 7 fathers of the dwarves in a hall under the mountains in Middle-earth. Aluva Tar knew what was done, and in the very hour that Aiul's work was complete and he was pleased, and began to instruct the dwarves in the speech he had devised for them, Aluva Tar spoke to him, and Aiul heard his voice and was silent. And the voice of Aluva Tar said to him, "Why hast thou done this? Why dost thou attempt a thing which thou knowest is beyond thy power and thy authority? For thou hast from me as a gift thy own being only, and no more. And therefore the creatures of thy hand and mine can live only by that being, moving when thou thinkest to move them, and if they thought be elsewhere, standing idle. Is that thy desire?" Then Aiul answered, "I did not desire such lordship. I desired things other than I am, to love and to teach them, so that they too might perceive the beauty of Ea, which thou hast caused to be. For it seemed to me that there is great room in Arda for many things that might rejoice in it, yet it is for the most part empty still. And in my impatience I have fallen into folly. Yet the making of things is in my heart, from my own making by thee. And the child of little understanding that makes a play of the deeds of his father may do so without thought of mockery, but because he is the son of his father. But what shall I do now, so that thou be not angry with me forever? As a child to his father I offer to thee these things, the work of the hands which thou hast made. Do with them what thou wilt, but should I not rather destroy the work of my presumption?" Then Aiul took up a great hammer to smite the dwarves, and he wept. But Aluva Tar had compassion upon Aiul and his desire, because of his humility, and the dwarves shrank from the hammer and were afraid, and they bowed down their heads and begged for mercy. And the voice of Aluva Tar said to Aiul, "Thy offer I accepted, even as it was made. Dost thou not see that these things now have a life of their own, and speak with their own voices? Else they would not have flinched from thy blow, nor from any command of thy will." Then Aiul cast down his hammer and was glad, and he gave thanks to Aluva Tar, saying, "May Eru bless my work and amend it." But Aluva Tar spoke again and said, "Even as I gave being to the thoughts of the Ainur at the beginning of the world, so now I have taken up thy desire and given to it a place therein. But in no other way will I amend thy handiwork, and as thou hast made it, so it shall be. But I will not suffer this, that these should come before the firstborn of my design, nor that thy impatience should be rewarded. They shall sleep now in the darkness under stone, and shall not come forth until the firstborn have awakened upon earth. And until that time thou shalt wait, though long it seem. But when the time comes I will awaken them, and they shall be to thee as children. And often strife shall arise between thine and mine, the children of my adoption and the children of my choice." Hello, Matthew. Thanks for joining us. I'm glad you like my videos. So this is part of the origin of the rivalry between the elves and dwarves. The dwarves were created in secret by Aiul because he wanted friends, and that was not Aluva Tar's plan. He planned for the firstborn to be the elves. So even though, because Eowl, was such a kind-hearted and a great person, he allowed the dwarves to exist, he said they can't come to Middle-earth first, they have to wait. And so that's part of, there will be a lot of other things that happen, but that is part of the origin behind the anger between the two groups. Then Eowl took the 7 fathers of the dwarves and laid them to rest in far sundered places, and he returned to Valinor and waited while the long years lengthened. Since they were to come in the days of the power of Melkor, Eowl made the dwarves strong to endure. Therefore they are stone-hard, stubborn, fast in friendship and in enmity, and they suffer toil and hunger and hurt of body more heartily than all other speaking peoples. And they live long, far beyond the span of men, yet not forever. Aforetime it was held among the elves in Middle-earth that dying the dwarves returned to the earth and stone of which they were made. Yet that is not their own belief. For they say Eowl the Maker, who they call Mahal, cares for them, and gathers them to Mandos in halls set apart, and that he declared to their fathers of old that Aluva Tar will hallow them and give them a place among the children in the end. Then their part shall be to serve Eowl and to aid him in the remaking of Arda after the last battle. They say also that the 7 fathers of the dwarves return to live again in their own kin, and to bear once more their ancient names, of whom Durin was the most renowned in after ages, father of the kindred most friendly to elves, whose mansions were at Khazad-dûm. Yeah, that's how we know Tolkien was English, a lifelong grudge between races over a matter of queuing. Oh, man. So the dwarves, their own idea about their mortality is that they go to the halls of Mahal or what have you. I think it's basically confirmed in some other stories that their spirits do wait in a separate place from where the elves and those folks wait. So they do have souls. It's not like they're just going to turn back to stone, but their role is to be determined in the next world. When Eowl labored in the making of the dwarves, he kept his work hidden from the other Valar, but at last he opened his mind to Yavana, and told her of all that had come to pass. Then Yavana said to him, Eru is merciful. Now I see that thy heart rejoiceth, as indeed it may, for thou hast received not only forgiveness, but bounty. Yet because thou hidest this from me until its achievement, thy children will have little love for the things of my love. They will love first the things made by their own hands, as doth their father. They will delve in the earth, and the things that grow and live upon the earth they will not heed. Many a tree shall feel the bite of their iron without pity. But Eowl answered, That shall also be true of the children of Aluva Tar, for they will eat and they will build. And though the things of thy realm have worth in themselves, and would have worth if no children were to come, yet Eru will give them dominion, and they shall find use all they find in Arda, though not by the purpose of Eru, without respect or without gratitude. Not unless Melkor darkened their hearts, said Yavana, and she was not appeased, but grieved in heart, fearing what might be done upon Middle-earth in the days to come. Therefore she went before Mon Way, and she did not betray the counsel of Eowl, but she said, King of Arda, is it true, as Eowl hath said to me, that the children, when they come, shall have dominion over all the things of my labor, to do with as they will? So, basically, she's saying, hey, I love plants and trees and flowers, and your kids are not going to respect those things. And Eowl's like, well, yeah, but neither of the men are, they're going to cut down trees and Yavana's like, no, you can't cut down my trees, what? And so she's going to the big god and saying, hey, why the fuck are they allowed to kill my trees? It is true, said Mon Way, but why dost thou ask? For thou hast no need of the teaching of Eowl. Then Yavana was silent and looked into her own thought, and she answered, My heart is anxious, thinking of the days to come. All my works are dear to me. Is it not enough that Melkor should have marred so many? Shall nothing that I have devised be free from the dominion of others? If thou hast thy will, what would thou reserve? Said Mon Way. Of all thy realm, what dost thou hold dearest? All have their worth, said Yavana, and each contributes to the worth of others. But the Kelvar can flee or defend themselves, whereas the Olvar cannot. And among these I hold trees dear. Long in the growing, swift shall they be in the felling, and unless they pay toll with fruit upon bough little mourned in their passing. so I see in my thought. Would that the trees might speak on behalf of all things that have roots, and punish those that wrong them. This is a strange thought, said Mon Way. Yet it was in the song, said Yavana, for while thou wert in the heavens, and with Ulmo built the clouds and poured out the rains, I lifted up the branches of great trees to receive them, and some sang to Aluva Tar amid the wind and the rain. Then Mon Way sat silent, and the thought of Yavana that she had put into his heart grew and unfolded, and it was beheld by Aluva Tar. Then it seemed to Mon Way that the song rose once more about him, and he heeded now many things therein that though he had heard them, had not heeded before. And at last the vision was renewed, but it was now not remote, for he was himself within it, and yet he saw that all was upheld by the hand of Aluva Tar, and the hand entered in, and from it came forth many wonders, that had until then been hidden from him in the hearts of the Ainur. Then Mon Way awoke, and he went down to Yavana upon Izella Har, and he sat beside her beneath the two trees. And Mon Way said, O Kementari, Eru hath spoken, saying, Do then any of the Valar suppose that I did not hear all the song, even the least sound of the least voice? Behold, when the children awake, then the thought of Yavana will awake also, and it will summon spirits from afar, and they will go among the Kelvar and the Olvar, and some will dwell therein and be held in reverence, and their anger shall be feared. For a time, while the firstborn are in their power, and while the secondborn are young. But dost thou not remember, Kementari, that thy thought sang not always alone? Did not thy thought and mine meet also, so that we took wing together like great birds that soar above the clouds? That also shall come to be by the heed of Aluva Tar, and before the children awake there shall go forth with wings, like the wind of the eagles of the Lord of the West. Then Yavana was glad, and she stood up, reaching her arms toward the heavens, and she said, High shall climb the trees of Kementari, that the eagles of the king may house therein. But Mon Way rose also, and it seemed that he stood to such a height that his voice came down to Yavana as from the paths of the winds. Nay, he said, only the trees of Aiul will be tall enough. In the mountains the eagles shall house, and hear the voices of those who call upon us. But in the forest shall walk the shepherds of the trees. Then Mon Way and Yavana parted for a time, and Yavana returned to Aiul, and he was in his smithy. Actually, I'm going to stop right there and explain. So, Yavana was worried that her plants and trees were going to be destroyed and no one was going to protect them, and she said that to Mon Way, and Mon Way and Eru had a moment, and basically they've said, okay, there will be guardians of the trees, and those are the Ents, the walking, talking trees that show up in The Lord of the Rings. When the world it finally comes into being, the Ents will be there to protect the trees, and Mon Way also explains that the eagles will exist, and that's the, the birds that Gandalf flies on the bird, and the bird shows up and carries them from Mordor. Those guys will also exist and will be guardians of the world, and so that when the world comes into being, there will be guardians of nature to protect nature. I wanted to stop and explain all that because the last part of this story where she goes back to her husband to say, hey, I'm gonna have guardians for all my plants is really funny. Then Mon Way and Yavana parted for that time, and Yavana returned to Aiul. He was in his smithy pouring molten metal into a mold. Eru is bountiful, she said. Now let thy children beware, for there shall walk a power in the forest, whose wrath they will arouse at their peril. Nonetheless, they will have need of wood, said Aiul, and he went on with his smith work. I love that line. It's just like, they're still gonna need trees. They're still gonna have to cut down trees. It's just so funny to me. And it sounds like so typical of a married couple. They're gods and goddesses, but, having the wife walk in like, ha! I did it. I was right. And the husband being like, well, they're still gonna need wood. That's still gonna be necessary. Oh man, I really love that. That's one of my favorite stories. It explains a lot of cool stuff, where the eagles came from, why the Ents exist, why the dwarves exist. Yes, I feel bad for her. She just wants to protect her tree babies. Yeah, she was nervous that nobody was gonna care about the trees. And she's not wrong a lot. Well, I mean, Tolkien's whole thing is very, protect nature kind of thing. One of the things I've always found amusing is he considered Norman conquest one of the worst calamities to befall England, and it was because of their horses, so he created Rohan. That's pretty fun. If she really loved her trees, she wouldn't have made them so flammable. Yeah, there's a lot of nature themes in these stories. Tolkien loved nature and wildlife, and he saw how it was getting really mistreated and not respected in his time, and he didn't like that. We will call it there because my voice is a little hoarse, and we've read quite a few chapters. We'll come back next Monday at 11 a.m. We'll start doing it Monday and Wednesday from now on. And we're getting into the good stuff now. We'll start reading what the book is actually named for. The Silmarillion refers to this epic adventure over the Silmarils, which are the shiniest gems you ever did see. Thanks for joining me. Let me jump over to my ending screen. Where is it? Here it is. Thanks again to all our members. Odd Molly, thank you for supporting the channel. I will be back at 3 today to finish Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne. Tomorrow we'll be watching another Miyazaki movie. Members get to pick which movie we watch, so be sure to vote in Discord. Join the Discord if you want to hang out and watch the film. And we'll be playing Call of Cthulhu tomorrow, so that'll be fun. I'll see y'all later. Bye.